So one of our unique selling points at Onyx Markets is getting access to Flux, which is our software platform that has industry grade data and information. The whole point is to get you right on the level playing field with everyone else in the industry in terms of visibility and transparency. So with me is the Chief Commercial Officer who oversees the tech with the development of Flux and its future. So Ishan, thanks for coming on. I just want to explain and be really super clear why it's so valuable, where it comes from, and what Flux is.
Yeah, so obviously our trading floor is the market leader, highest market share in many of the markets that we trade, up to 30, 40, 50% in some cases. That generates a lot of really valuable data, right? Price data, position data. We have a whole research and media team that writes articles off that. And the way that we've taken all that data and we've put it in a really easy to use interface in Flux, right? So that gives everybody complete transparency who uses it, right? They can see where the market really is, right? It takes away anything that's opaque. And we give it out to people who want to trade.
So again, straight away, I think people would say, what is fair value? In FX or equities, there's no concept because the liquidity is so tight. That's not the case in oil swaps. It's an OTC market. In other words, it's still voice traded, and obviously that's on a transition as well. But fair value is very important because there's so many contracts and so many variations. To actually know where value is a big part of being on market, right? There's a big industry for basically taking advantage of people who don't know where the market is. So just by providing visibility on that and knowing if a buying price or a selling price is close to where it should be is a huge step and a huge cost saving for corporates, but obviously everyone, right? That's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, so I think, as you go more end consumer, fair value can get very mixed up, right? You go try and change your FX at the airport, right? You see huge spreads of prices. In the same way in oil, the truck driver who wants to hedge, the airline, the shipping company, you filling up petrol, you ask 3 different people, you might get 3 different prices. So how do you know where the true price is? And that's what we provide in Flux. So everybody can see whether they can trade there or not, but at least we're showing them where is true fair value in the market, right? Where is the midpoint of where it should be? Yeah.
And then ultimately we're providing the same prices for the industry like BP, Shell and all that to retail. And that's part of the gig. People won't like us doing this because you're basically eroding a lot of the fat and the margin that usually gets added on to the end consumer and all these middlemen. So I think maybe it'll take some time for people to really understand how powerful that is, but it honestly is from our perspective. I think another thing I want to touch on with Flux, so you're going to get this, basically live fair value assessment, but also oil swaps market is very low algorithmic, very low technical driven, very low, zero high frequency trading. This is by far majority oil trade houses, hedges and the like. Very few speculators. So when you're entering this market, and if you're a retail trader, you apply technical analysis to charting in foreign exchange, and that's pretty tried and tested. That's not tried and tested in this market. So that is a good thing, right? It's a very early stage market for this kind of development. So Flux has this live millisecond fair value in charting and with seasonal charts. Again, this is not like this has existed for a long time in oil swaps. This is new even for the industry. So that's a pretty big deal as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, the beauty of it is that it means that, the top trader at one of the top trade houses, and we're giving that same capability of drawing technicals on millisecond by millisecond charts and, seasonal charts. We're giving them the news, the analysis, so that they can analyze the market in the same way that, a retail trader hedging his, petrol consumption could do the same analysis on Flux as the top trader at BP, Shell, or one of the big companies.
And legitimately, it might seem like relatively clunky because it's got a long way to go to become like the high quantitative expertise of, say, bond markets and all these kind of markets that are getting super sophisticated.
Yeah.
But that doesn't detach from the fact that that is the way it is. It's not like you're doing something and it's leagues behind these geniuses. No, you're going to be put right on a level playing field straight away, and that's why I'm excited, because it's like people have this impression that oil markets is so complicated, it's so difficult. Well, let's see, right? Because you apply just simple technical analysis and you'll get somewhere because of how immature the market is. But I also love the oil swaps market for it's much tighter relationship with the physical market. So because it's more near term, right, it reflects contracts for physical loading barrels that are very close in time, like a couple of weeks away in some scenarios. The futures that you get exposure to is 2 months forward. So you get a much more accurate reflection of what's really going on. So what does that mean? That means particularly if you trade like a differential, something against something, that will actually move relative to the supply and demand, which is a big issue for financial markets these days, right? It moves more about trader psychology and these kind of things. Whereas the oil swaps market does have that element, of course, but it's quite faithful to the physical movement, at least compared with a classic futures market. So I think that's massive, right? You have a supply and demand view. You pick up the newspaper and you see tariffs from Trump. You see inter-region, there's going to be a disparity. There's going to be changes to shipping prices. That will change the price of the differential relatively predictably compared with the random volatility you sometimes get with futures, right?
Yeah. So yeah, exactly that. There's a whole breadth of contracts, and they all relate to something. Whether you're a plastics manufacturer in Korea or a US shipping company, there is an oil contract that you are exposed to specifically, right? And the reason it's not traded today by small corporates and retail is because they don't have the access to it, right? It's not liquid enough. So that's kind of reserved for the big boys at the moment.
Yeah.
But when we open it up, we show them where true fair value is. We give them all the tools to do the same analysis that the big guys do. Now they can trade it well.
So I think, again, specific about Flux, that is different from the portal, which is where you would do your trades from. And, over time, we hope to merge the two, and we'll get to that in a second. But I think the important thing is Flux is there for visibility, right? So the contracts that will be available to you today or day one will be a certain number of outrights. And then we're going to be releasing some differentials and then time spreads. So we've got a journey of release of products, but Flux will from day one have the most of the complex there, just so you know what's going on, right? Yeah. And that's important. You can do your historical analysis, your seasonal analysis, and you may just be looking at something like the refinery margins, right? So we've put together all the products versus crude and said, look, for Europe, there's one price, and for Asia, there's another price. This is what the refinery margin is. And that's a very important indicator for outright prices as well. So, you might not necessarily be able to trade everything on Flux day one, but it will help in your analysis, right, of other things.
Exactly, yeah. So there are hundreds of contracts, each going out, trading monthly, weekly in some cases, daily in some cases, 2-3 years out. So that's thousands and thousands of contracts. So while we are getting there to give you the ability to trade all those contracts, day one, at least you can see where all those contracts are. You can trade, 30% of them. And over time, we will be adding more and more, as we get further down the journey.
And then more and more complexity as people get to an understanding. Like you see the markets, the time spreads are all very high or very low. That's saying things about the market that, people will get a feel for the more they learn about it. Yeah. So it is really important to see what's going on, even if you're not trading it in different markets.
In COVID, there were articles in the Daily Mail which were kind of trying to explain, contango in the market and why tankers were sitting offshore. And, now someone with Flux now could really see what is the value of that and how much money are they making off the back of it, point. Right? Yeah. So it's quite interesting to look at on that.
So that's getting on market. And then we've got, essentially the classic dashboard will have these prices. We'll get settlement price indications so you can compare it day on day, things like that. We've also got the news feed, which, 5-10 years ago, very exclusive to the big media agencies, right? They're the ones that own the headlines and that's it. Now, with AI, with Google, with Twitter or X, or whatever, there's a lot of free information. So that's what we've got with Flux, or you can explain this, is a high-tech way of getting all that like very on-market information instantaneously, right?
Yeah. So again, we're kind of leveraging from our traders, right? So we look at what do they look at, right? And we synthesize all that information and we give it into one nice, clean kind of newsfeed. There's so much noise today, right? On top of that, so now you're following immediately, as soon as you get Flux, you're looking at all the same information that the top traders in the market are looking at. And then we also
market moving headlines, right? There's something comes out and it genuinely moves the market instantaneously.
Exactly, yeah. And I think the consumer retail guys who trade crypto and FX, they kind of expect this now, right? Because they go on their crypto apps, they go on this, and they get all this information. So it's important to show accurate, fair stuff
of global like headlines, right? And even niche area headlines. But I think we take it a step further and say, okay, that's the information that's out there collated real time, so it's effective for your holistic trading. But we know it's a niche market, right? And that's the whole point of this exercise. It's been hidden away from general people for a long time and even corporates. So the next step is to say, okay, there's information out there, but we've got our own media team, our own research, our own publishing team, whose job is to provide the visibility that's specific. So taking all the headlines, and they even talk about the UK budget and things like that. So what's the impact on oil? Well, they're getting an idea of how the sentiment in these macro headlines and what's going on filters into the real oil swaps market. And they're doing that job. So there's articles on that about how it's moved markets, why it's interesting. And the officials might be talking a bit more sentiment driven, whatever. But the point is, these guys are much more directly facing the niche OTC market, and they have both the ability to translate headlines into the complexities of what's going on in this market to guide you there. But to be honest, they also offer some entertainment, right? They really genuinely are trying to make it readable and all that. So that's a big service that I don't see how anyone can compete with, right? Even Bloomberg's and all that. They can't. They talk about things that have happened in the oil swaps market maybe 3-4 days later, and only if it's a really big, widely understood thing, not the niche, right?
Exactly, yeah. So, and the other thing is that the relationships in some of these contracts don't correct as fast, right? So, you can, when you look at, cracks and crack boxes, and you can get into all kinds of funky contracts and relationships between them. And these aren't so actively looked at, right? It kind of creates a bit of an advantage potentially, right? So I'm always amazed, like listening to the traders, there's information that seemingly is unrelated. A car factory shuts down in Germany, right? And what is that impacts a lot of oil contracts, right? And power contracts and gas, and all these things are kind of
You just got to learn how to trade that expression, because it's not as simple as picking outright and trade it. People got to get familiar with the intricacies, but exactly. I think that will happen over time. Another thing I wanted to mention, so this is Flux in terms of the software platform. You meet our terms of service, you will get access to this platform, a web-based platform. There's also the Flux News, so flux.live, which is just the free to access, immediate access online, which has these articles we're talking about, the information. It has even like the calendars of what's happening, what contracts expiring, or, oil specific events. But I think one thing that's a little bit hidden, if you like, that is there, I want people to know about, is there's also dashboards for free. Again, doesn't even require access to the Flux platform. That goes through positioning, right? So my proprietary data is out there once a week about how this oil swap market is positioned. It's the equivalent of the CFTC Commitment of Traders report, but for oil swaps. I think that's massive. That's there. Go and find it. We'll try and emphasize it a bit more on the website. And you've also got dashboards for, more freely available information like oil stocks, but you're able to play around with the data and what it means, and day on day, week on week changes. We've done a lot of work to make this freely accessible, so you have more of an understanding out there. And we don't want this stuff to be behind closed doors and charged like it has been for so long. There's no need. Like, it's not the way of the world, right? So I just want to emphasize, if you're on flux.live, explore a lot, right? Because there's a lot going on. We're doing our best to try and make these things all visible, but there's so much going on. You kind of do need to explore. You will see when you do that there is a paywall right behind for our research. Now, unfortunately, that will maintain behind a paywall that has our deep proprietary data analysis and trade ideas. It's not necessarily suitable for retail, but it's something we charge for. So there are things that you can't access, but there's still plenty that's free.
Yeah, one thing that is probably one of my favorite sections on Flux News is the data vault section, and that takes in all the stock releases, public releases from CFTC futures, all the data. And one of our head of research here, who worked at many big research houses in the market, he synthesized all that information and puts it into clean reports, how he likes to look at it, right? And we now take that and put that for free on Flux News as well, right? So that's one of the...
There's a hell of a lot, right? And I guess before anyone accuses us of, this is the whole point. Why are we doing this? Because we want people to trade. We want people to understand how to trade. If everyone's on a level playing field, more liquidity, more efficient market, and we can set this market on a whole new trajectory of growth, which I think will benefit everyone as they can harness the power of financial energy markets. So thanks, Isham, for that. And thanks, guys.